Okay, guys, we probably have people still joining, but I want to go ahead and start because I want to make sure that Christian and Andrea and Matt and April have enough time to share all the stuff they're planning on sharing with you guys. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. You saw that we were recording this, and we will send out the recording and the deck that Christian uses after this event. So if anybody is interested, you'll get that after the event. And then we really encourage questions, you guys. So if it's during the presentation or a discussion and you want to just put the question in chat, feel free to do that. We'll be monitoring the chat. And then feel free to come off mute anytime that it's appropriate if you've got a question to ask anyone on the panel or even Christian. So for those of you guys that don't know me, I'm Cindy Olson, founder of the Executive Strategic Alliance, or ESA, as we like to call ourselves. And for the past 6 years, we've worked side by side with ADP to build this thought leadership network. And we started out delivering world-class thought leadership to participants. And we currently have participants over 1,200 from 20 different cities now. We've been able to expand our network virtually, and we're so excited about that. In the past year and a half, Anna Randazzo and John Fink, who are on this call as well, they joined me, and we're expanding beyond thought leadership, and we'll be rolling out in January a couple of new offerings in addition to a new ESA website. The first offering is a WorkTech Startup Advisor Group to bring WorkTech startups to our network. And we've been doing this for a few months, and we're really going to make it, formalize it starting in January. And then the second offering is a board positioning membership that helps our executives have a stronger chance of obtaining a public, private, or nonprofit board opportunity. So you'll be hearing more about that in January. So today, we're very fortunate to have Marcus Buckingham's right-hand person lead the discussion for us. Christian Gomez is an accomplished thought leader in his own right, and he's highly regarded in the world of talent and engagement. Christian began his career in the U.S. military as a sergeant in the Marines, and his vast experiences served as a powerful foundation for corporate business. He holds a master's degree in leadership from W. Huizenga School of Business and has dedicated his academic and professional career to studying the intersections between leadership and business. In addition to Christian, we have 3 amazing executives that are joining us as well. April Rimpley, who currently serves as the Senior Vice President of Human Resources for Ameritas Holding Company, headquartered in Lincoln, Nebraska. She's held that role since 2017. Prior to that, she was Vice President, Customer Connections and Operations, and held various roles with increased responsibility within customer relations and operation functions of Ameritas beginning in 1999. We have also Andrea Lampert, and Andrea is the Vice President of People at Perficient, works across the company supporting business goals by driving the implementation of strategic HR objectives. Prior to being at Perficient, she held HR leadership roles at BJC Healthcare in St. Louis, Express Scripts, and she started her career as a registered nurse. And she's amazing. And then finally, last but by no means least, we have Matt Hoskins, and we are excited to have him as our CIO. He is the Chief Information Officer at BURKS Group in St. Joe, and leads the technology teams throughout the BURKS portfolio of companies. And by the way, if you guys don't know all the things that BURKS companies entail, they do have, if you're familiar with wine, Fitbit wine, and I think they've done really well during the pandemic. So I'm excited to have both Christian and this panel of extremely amazing executives join us. And with that, Christian, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Thank you for the intro, and absolutely thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to be here with you today, being able to have a conversation around some of the items that we're all very passionate about and has so much impact on so many of the people that we serve. So as I was thinking about supporting this group today and just being part of the conversation, just being very honest with all of you, I was pulled off the road 2 years ago, like many of us were, right? And I was doing this, I used to do as a part of my job, the speaking circuit. I'd go do keynotes, do events, do roundtables. And then we were all sent home, and now we're all communicating in this manner, and we've all gotten a lot better at it. But it still didn't feel right. And I know I'm more of a face-to-face person myself. So for me, it always felt a little bit awkward. So about almost a year ago, I went and I tapped into my network, people like yourselves, and I said, how do we make these experiences as valuable as possible? I know how hard it is for each of you to attend these. And it's like, how do we make sure that instead of producing a phenomenal presentation, how do we make sure that it's a meaningful experience so that not only are you enjoying the process as you go through it, but how is it meaningful when you walk away? And then I talked to people like Cindy Olson, actually. I talked to Cindy very early on, and I told her that I wanted to do these in a different manner. And based off of what I was hearing was, number one, I will take up time out of my day to join a session where I can sit and hear directly from my peers. I don't get to do that as much as I used to, and it's incredible how valuable their insight is because we have so many shared experiences, even when we're in different industries. The second thing is I would like to get insight pertinent to the things that I'm facing that I might not get access to, or frankly, that I might not have the time to consume by going through articles or research papers myself. And then the third thing was, and this is the key thing for what we hopefully will experience today, is it's very difficult to sit through PowerPoint presentations when when it's virtual. So one of the things that I devised was step away from the PowerPoint, come with insight, and bring peers. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and I wanted to thank Cindy for kind of coming along with me and creating this different type of experience. But one of the things that are going to make this really special, hopefully, is number one, you will get as much insight as I can provide in the context of the program today, but I want most of the insight to come from your peers as they react and they hear and they interact with some of the data and the insights that I'll provide. So as we all come together right now, I think we can all acknowledge that we are living in very interesting times right now. Aside from the obvious, it's incredibly fascinating to be in the people discipline right now. It just feels different. So forget what you're hearing about terms like the resignation or the talent tsunami or all these catchy terms that we hear out in our industry. It just feels very, very different. So I thought I'd open up by kind of shedding a little bit of light around why it feels so different. And one of the things that I've noticed, particularly from my perspective, in my entire career, at least for the last 5-10 years, one of the ways that I've been really useful to the organizations that I've worked with was building a bridge between the world of HR and the world of business. Being able to sit down with COOs, CEOs, and have conversations from a business standpoint in terms of how our talent strategies and what we do as a discipline can kind of work together, as opposed to feeling it like it's either an afterthought or it's an inconvenience at times. As I look at the last year and a half, my job has almost become unnecessary because the business leaders, and I'm not sure if you guys are experiencing this in your organizations, they're so much more in tune with our discipline. We almost don't have to bring them and get their attention about our people, about turnover, about different projects that we're doing. A lot of times when I hear from leaders like yourselves, they're bringing it to you. They're saying, what are we doing? How is this? What is our strategy looking like? What are we doing in the context of our people to be able to make sure that they're showing up, they feel engaged, that they're producing, and they're creating the outcomes that we all need? Now, for those of you that might have felt it but didn't really realize that it was very different, I can give you a couple of stats that'll kind of shed light on why it feels so different. The first thing is that we're having over 4 million people leave their jobs on a monthly basis throughout this year. I remember sitting here in March and people telling me it's going to change by the time we get to the summer. Well, it's going to subside by the time we get to the fall. And now we're sitting here in December, if you can believe it, and those numbers are still strong. So turnover is increasing at an incredibly rapid rate. And then at the same time, we have an incredible amount of job openings, which I think is related. Part of it is the recovery and us ramping back up. It's over 11 million job openings right now as we sit here. At the same time, there's less qualified people to fill a lot of these roles that we have. So if you put yourself in the mind of a business leader, all of a sudden my HR partner, my talent partners are business critical. It's no longer an inconvenience, or it's no longer an aspirational thing that it would be nice to have that, but we've got all these other priorities going on. So number one, hopefully you're all experiencing this. And if not, then you should take ownership in your own world to make sure your business leaders understand that what we're working with and the topics that we're going to talk about today are mission critical. These are not aspirational. These are not inconveniences, but things that we need to work on right now. So as we move into what we can do and what does that mean for us, it's an opportunity for us because now we have a spotlight. And what I wanted to share with you is what we're seeing in terms of what is it that we're doing that we can do that would have the most impact. One of the things that I've been talking about consistently with leaders like yourselves is the fact that we need to be smarter right now. And by smarter, I don't mean more intelligent. It's kind of like the term that says work harder. I mean, don't work smarter, not harder. It is the same thing. So one of the things that I keep seeing is number one, there's a lot of data and there's a lot of insight, but there's almost too much. Which is the data and the insight that I should be focused on, not just so that I understand it, but to make sure that I'm extracting it from my organization. What do I need to know and what do I need to prioritize? The second thing, going back to the topic of prioritization, what are the key things that I could be doing right now that would have the most impact? Because what I keep hearing consistently over and over again is a talent strategy sounds great. Putting together a program sounds great, but I need to stop people from leaving tomorrow. I need to make sure that I'm bringing the right people in next month. I've got orders that are coming in, work that needs to be done, and I need to address that immediately. So from an immediacy standpoint, what is it that we could be doing right now that would have the most impact on the things that we care about? The first thing that I'll share with you, there's 3 studies that I highly recommend that I've really consumed and that make up the body of the stats and the content that I'll give you guys today. The first one was a study that the ADP Research Institute did on resiliency. And the context of that study is they wanted to measure how far people can bend before they break at work. What does break look like? The most obvious answer is turnover. They just decide, I'm clocking out, I'm done. There's also burnout though. People have to go on leave and they can't continue to function on a regular basis. And then there's low productivity. People just show up to work, but that's basically all they're doing. They're showing up and they're grinding and they're thinking tomorrow it'll feel better. Next week it'll feel better, which is not the type of workforce that you want. So that is the resiliency study. The other one that they released not too long ago was the definitive study of engagement. And what they did is that they compiled a series of engagement studies over the last 10 years. And then they found the commonalities and then they tied it with data that they were getting during the pandemic across the world in thousands of organizations. And then the last study, which is one that was released very recently, which I thought was pretty fascinating. And it was a study around the HR experience score, designing a measurement instrument that rates your employees based off of the impact that the HR function is having on them. And the key metric that they studied was, what is the likelihood for this individual, this employee, to recommend the organization to want to stay or even be looking for a job based off of the way that they interact with their HR department. Now, what I'll do now is I'll just talk a couple of the highlights and things that we got from those studies, and then I'm going to open it up to the group because I want to hear about this dynamic through the lens of the organizations that they're supporting and the work that they're doing and the things that they're prioritizing. Then throughout the rest of the session, we'll go ahead and then we'll weave in some other things that we're seeing, discovery stats. And then what I hope we do at the end is that we come up with some prescriptions on what we feel we can do tomorrow when we walk away. And hopefully this is an ongoing conversation. I know that this network meets on a regular basis, and I'd love to be able to continue that conversation, layer in additional topics maybe in the future, or bring in some content in future sessions. So what I'll start with is 2 stats that I thought were absolutely fascinating. The first stat, which comes from the engagement survey, the engagement study. The thing that they found was that employees that identified as being part of a team were exponentially more likely to stay in the job and to be highly engaged. Where it got really interesting is that this included contingency workers. It included people like doctors, people that you would not normally associate as being part of a formal team. So when you started to look and peel back, one of the things that we started noticing was, I know I'm in an organization, but do I feel like I have a team that I'm a part of? I know it sounds a little soft and fluffy, but am I part of a family? Is there someone that I look to, that I interact with, that gives me feedback on my work, that provides me support, or somebody to bounce ideas off of? And then the latest one that came back as it relates to the HR experience, when you look at the things that people leaned on the heaviest when they had a positive experience with their HR department, one of the topics that kept surfacing was the quality and the relevance of their onboarding process. How were they able to integrate me into an organization? So with that, one of the big conclusions and the things that we're working on is we all have onboarding strategies. How intentional are our onboarding strategies, not just in bringing the individual into the organization, understanding their job and how to be able to navigate the organization, but how intentional are we about team membership? Making sure there's a small community around that new hire, that they understand there's obviously a leader, but there should be cohorts, people that they interact with. So as I open it up for this first question, I'd love to give you guys a little bit more license to be able to tell me a little bit more about your industry, a little bit more about the things that are really important to you right now. But what I'd like to know is, over the last 18 months, how has the nature of your business changed? Has the work itself changed, or the way that you do the work changed? And I'll give you a couple of easy examples, or common examples, I should say. One of the things we see a lot is the obvious, which is the hybrid environment. Some people went from fully on site to being fully remote, or somewhere in between. The other dynamic that I think is fascinating, and it's actually even more common than I realized, is the fact that we've got a lot of new people in our organizations that have never personally met their leader, or they might have never even personally met their peers. So as I open it up, I'll go ahead and I'll use my Brady Bunch view, and I'll start with you, April. Tell me a little bit about yourself, please, and tell us a little bit about your industry and how has the nature of work changed? And if you'd like to kind of lead into what your onboarding process looked like, and if you've changed that, we'd love to hear about that as well.
All right, thank you. Well, one of our main businesses is life insurance. We also have DI, retirement plans, and group dental and vision. And so we have a diversified platform to work from. And I would say that we did go to fully remote towards the end of March of 2020, which was very new to us. So one of the things in the insurance industry, of course, is that we've been in business since 1887, so a long time. I don't think we would have ever said we could have gotten the work done remotely before we had to do that. And we did identify the jobs that needed to be in office, which was a very small percent, maybe about 8% of our 2,400 workers. So the way that work has changed is we have seen policyholders, providers, and different stakeholders become a lot more electronic, which is very positive for how to do business in a more quick manner, as well as not spending money or creating waste with a lot of printing. So that's been very positive. And we did have to move to all onboarding, offboarding, and training for each of our different business units. That was done in this remote setting. And so we quickly, that very first kind of March, April, really revamped everything so that we could use these online tools. We have our IT department highly engaged in really how to do that. And we, I don't want to sell the product, but it's like, we use Microsoft Teams and a few other things that are very useful for us to be able to kind of act like we have a drive-by by just calling somebody up on Teams and being able to see them because you can't walk past their desk. And even how we send things back, how we get people to set up their equipment. And then to your point, making sure that that onboarding is relevant. We do introduce them to our mission, vision, values, and we feel very fortunate because I think through the pandemic, a lot of what we heard about was people making sure they were looking for a purpose. Why do I come to work? Why am I working here? What am I doing? And so we are very fortunate that we fulfill lives is kind of our tagline. So we help you get access to care or to react in times when maybe a loved one has passed away or you're just doing planning for your retirement. And so that's been, that purpose and that connection has been very good for us. We've expanded our remote workers as we've started to roll back in. So in our large locations, Nebraska, Cincinnati, and then we have about 37 other smaller offices. We have the good fortune of not having a real heavy population. So I think how we've responded, there is some regional differences. We do have our protocols in play for safety, but had leadership roll in the summer after we did a job assessment. So based on your job and your role and your ability to do that job is how we decided if you are going to be remote or in office or hybrid. We call that flex at Ameritas because we're also moving to a leadership kind of a mindset shift to say, not only is it where and how you work, but it really is when and what tools to add flexibility. So not just, I want you here 8 to 5, wherever here is, and I better be able to see that you're logged in. We move to this flexibility mindset of how to get the work done at the right time in this team environment. So I think Microsoft Teams helped us to do that. And then to meet, who do you need to speak to? I would say I've been here a really long time. And when we onboard new people, you really realize, like, who do you need to go to get what you need when things are working totally smooth or you have a question. And so we changed those dynamics quite a bit. And now we're rolling in the rest of our associates, which is about 30% less capacity than we had in any facility before. And we're still kind of basically fluid, saying things might change and we might do something different because the pandemic is not over. So we've done all that, and we've really launched a future of work program where we're looking at upskilling, reskilling, how to make sure that as our customers and our employees transform, our company is transforming along with them to stay relevant and to make sure that not only do we offer good products and services in our mutually held structure, but we also offer a good employee experience where people really want to come to work, even if you're not physically coming to the facility.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. And there's a couple of common themes that I kept hearing. There was two in particular, which I find fascinating because these seem to be two of the things that we've seen that if you do implement and you are intentional about them, you will see an immediate impact. You won't see a 6 months, 12 times, like immediately. And the first is the ability to support and elevate your leaders. Understand that HR can't do it all on their own, creating a partnership with leaders. And the second thing that I hear is the importance of connections, more so than it's ever been before. So as I move over to Matt, if you can do the same, tell us a little bit about yourself, your organization, some of how has the nature of your work changed? Tell us a little bit about, let's focus on the connections conversation. What are you guys doing right now? Where is your intention lies as it relates to making sure that your people remain connected and continue to become more so as time goes on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the BURKS portfolio of companies, we operate across a lot of different verticals. For this particular question, I'd like to kind of focus on our broadcast television markets. We've got about 42 stations across the country. And when the pandemic hits, broadcast news, there's a television station, and that's where everybody lives. And everybody, and overnight we were essentially the technology teams and news and sales and production. We were basically asking them to produce a newscast from your house, and how do you do that? A lot of collaboration had to happen almost overnight. And to April's point, Microsoft Teams is the collaboration of choice. We're a fairly democratic organization in that we saw very early on that different technology stacks started popping up. Some people were using Teams, some people were using Slack, some people were using Zoom. And we quickly realized from a leadership perspective that while all those products, they do a similar thing, it's more important for the connectedness, exactly what Christian is talking about, that everyone's using the same platform so that you don't create islands of people using Slack and then other people using Teams and those kinds of things. So across the organization, we had to very, very quickly decide what our collaboration tools were going to be. Another strategy that we took during the pandemic and has really stuck throughout is the traditional model of having a single IT department, where everything flows up to, just kind of quickly broke down. And what we realized is we needed to embed the technology. The technology decisions were being made so quickly that we needed to embed the technologist deeper into the organization. And so we really assigned technology people to our news departments, to our sales departments, collaborating with them to formulate the solutions that would allow them to be putting these newscasts on, at their homes. I mean, literally in one instance, we had one of our engineers go to somebody's house, which we didn't love, but help set up a green screen so they could do the weather from their kitchen. And these are things that they never would have thought to do, but had to because of the pandemic. And so you really see the IT departments not really dissolving, but becoming,
I would say just.
Oh, I think there's a crosstalk.
I'm good. It'll be fine, Mo.
Thank you. What we've really seen is that the IT department has gone further into the organization and is closer to the solutions, closer to the people who are needing the solutions. Going on to the onboarding piece, I'm blessed to have a partner in HR who really sees the value of technology, and our strategy there is technology is so important to a person's first day, second day, that it's so important that it works the first time. One of the things that we try to measure is friction. What kind of friction is a user experiencing on their first, second, and third day? And if they can have a frictionless environment, and what I mean by that is they receive a laptop from IT and it works when they open it up. They understand how they're educated on what are the rules of the road. Are you expected to have your camera on when you're collaborating remotely? Do you have a culture where everyone should have their camera on? What are one of the things that we found that was silly, but it actually ended up being an easy way to communicate. Use of emojis. What's a consistent use of emojis for I'm working on this, or I'm having a bad day, or I'm looking at these kinds of things. Just the different communication styles and developing that culture, is really important. And then educating people as they're coming on what that is. How do stand-up meetings work? If you have stand-up meetings, those kinds of things. And so, having the different technology, partnering up with HR and IT to make sure that the first week, week to 10 to 30 days are as frictionless as possible. That's what we really measure.
Outstanding. I'm going to get into the weeds about measurement in a second, so I'm going to come back to both of you and ask you guys what you guys are monitoring from a measurement standpoint. But I'd like to move on. Andrea, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, tell me a little bit about your organization, how the nature of work has changed, and how you've been able to kind of address these big topics in the middle of such a critical time.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, wherever you may be, or even good evening. I'm happy to be here. And it's interesting as I listen to everything we're doing. By the way, we're on Teams as well. And it helps us a lot with connection. But I'm always, really stressing with folks that technology is something that we should use to build connections, not just make contacts, right? So how we use it and how we really implement has been really important to us. I feel pretty fortunate that I joined Perficient. So Perficient is a global digital consultancy. We work with some of the globe's biggest brands and really helping them connect with their customers. So when we stepped into the pandemic, I just joined the company. So I joined the company in May of 2020. So I feel lucky because I was able to kind of step in, experience onboarding in a virtual way, and really understand, gosh, how are we connecting with our employees? Because there I was, a new employee, kind of facing that as well. So, a lot to be able to learn just by virtue of the timing. I also came on board as the organization's first VP of People. We had a VP of HR, and we were really using that word to matter, right? To make a difference. And oh, what timing, right? In a time when, during 2020, the focus on people. And Christian, you said this earlier in your intro, how business leaders are so much more focused on people. So it was a really wonderful time to be able to, really think about what does it mean to be a people-centric organization. So as I joined the organization, we set out to really think about that employee experience and what it means to be a person in this organization. And, I'll say that we used the words remote and ready when we stepped into the pandemic because we were in most instances a remote organization. But it's interesting as you unpack that. So we're remote because we have consultants all around the globe. But the reality is our consultants actually were going to a client site a lot to do their work. So if you start to unpack it, they were remote, from one sense of the definition, but the reality is they were then all of a sudden sitting in their home offices, like we all were, right? Facing off with their clients. So they still had to learn how to work differently. So you don't want to take that word too much for granted and really understand, that everyone's environment changed because they weren't getting on a plane on Sunday night and coming home on Thursday night, like in true consulting fashion, right? They weren't going into a client workplace and connecting with others at that workplace. So really everybody was going through the same thing, no matter what. So it was really interesting to, kind of step into that seat and recognize it's important to build that connection. But really, there were two parts to a focus that we had going in. So first off, our people organization. You never want to, think that just because we're HR, we just jump into the next thing and we know exactly what we're doing, right? So really thinking about our people organization, and we went through a journey of defining our strategic vision and why we're even there, right? Why are we even here at Perficient? What is it that we're doing? So ultimately, our vision is to enable people to do their best work. Took us a long time to get to that very succinct statement, right? But it was also about really stepping into what we do is not just HR for HR. And there's a lot of organizations that if you think about it are thinking like, I got to manage the leave process. I got to, get people trained. I got to do HR for HR. I got to write the policies. I got to make sure people follow them. Right. And the challenge we put in front of our own HR team and our people team was to use a guiding principle of taking a walk in our employee shoes every single time you think about what you're doing. And really employing that design thinking approach, right? Where historically we would create a policy and then push it out, right? This is the way it's supposed to be, everybody follow. As opposed to really thinking about, okay, so ultimately what problem are we trying to solve? And employees help us understand what it's like in your world so we can build the right policy that follows what we need to, right? But also meet you where you are. And so everything we do, and it's really been interesting over the past 18 plus months to watch internally in our people team, our own people stopping and saying, well, wait a second, let's think about this. Let's sit in the employee seat and take it from that vantage point before we decide what we're going to do, or when we think about what problem we're trying to solve. So that's been really fun. And we've extended that into things like onboarding and thinking about that experience. The other thing we did was we also thought about how do we help people really appreciate why they even want to come to work here and why they want to stay here. And so we set out to just really understand what is it that we want to make that experience look like, right? Feel like, and that our employees can identify with. So we built what we called our promise to our people, which is quite simply to challenge, champion, and celebrate our people. But that's been a mantra now across the organization to a point where, we'll face off with leaders and say, okay, let's talk about it. How are we challenging our people? How are we championing our people? How are we celebrating our people? And it's led to a lot of other initiatives for us in the organization of how we recognize people and implementing a recognition platform, of how we're bringing people together and starting up things like employee resource groups. So really focusing on what it means to be an employee at Perficient and how we can help people continue to be challenged and to grow in the organization. So it's been a really fun journey. But I'll tell you, when I first came on board, I realized very quickly that I had to go to about 3 million different locations to really start to paint the picture and learn what we do at Perficient. And that is mind-boggling for anyone. So one of the first projects we set out to do was to focus on an intranet that really helps people have a place to live, right? To go, to find everything else, right? As opposed to having to find it in 3 million places. Now, granted, that intranet might connect you to all those places, but it's a place to begin your day. It's a place to, find the answers to the questions of your day. And it's a place to always know that kind of the what's going on. And it's really blown up for us as a place for people to find connection, to find news, to get their communication. So it's been a very good, not only onboarding tool, but connectivity resource for our organization.
That is phenomenal. One of the things that I love when we do these panels is the diversity of your experiences, right? You're serving very different people that are doing very different work. And even though your strategies and what you end up doing might seem very different, what I keep hearing in every aspect is the focus on the employee experience and the understanding that is ultimately what's going to determine almost everything. I know it sounds a little bit cliche or vague, but how an employee feels about their work, about the people they work with, what they do and how they do it is ultimately going to lead to all of those big things that we all want. We all want happy employees that are producing, that are staying here, that are creating a good experience for customers, and they're bringing forth a really good product. One of the things that I always talk about is how do we go, especially in times like this, how do we do it the best that we can to go from a reactive talent strategy to a proactive one, which sounds very catchy, right? When you put it in a phrase, but it's so hard to do. And frankly, there's only one way to be able to do it. And Andrea, you kind of nailed why. And it's like, you're not going to be everywhere at all times. You're not going to meet everybody in your company. So there's two things that we have to do in order to truly be able to get on a path to being more proactive. The first one is being able to understand how to measure and what to measure in my organization. I can't measure it all. I don't have even, I met with some teams that have phenomenal HR analytics. Like there's one organization that I won't name so that we don't hate on them, but they have 32 data analysts in the HR department alone, analyzing all of their HR data. They have over 50,000 employees, so they're a much larger organization and they're a tech company. So it kind of makes sense, but even they can't just afford to go out there and just collect every bit of data that they can. So how do we start to understand where do we begin and what's going to inform our strategies in the most meaningful way? So my big thing is I want to know where you guys start. What is your signal as opposed to noise? But I'll tell you what we found to be really, really important. The first thing, and this is a part that frankly, to be frank, a lot of organizations get wrong. And the first thing that we can't do is you can't measure at the organizational level, specifically when you're talking about the employee experience. If you go and just do a little bit of introspection and go back to your career and think about the different places you've been and the different roles that you've had, your experience is not necessarily dictated by the organization itself. The experience is dictated by the microenvironment that you're experiencing. It's obviously the role you're in, the person you report to, the people you interact with. But suddenly, if you switch teams, but you stay in the same organization, your experience could be wildly different. So one of the first things that we always recommend and that we've seen with organizations that are really able to make that shift is start to measure locally. Don't do everything you can to compile information at the local level and then aggregate the information. You can still have an organizational metric that tells you X, Y, or Z as it relates to what it feels like to work at your company, but you have to derive it at the local level. So as anytime you're questioning whether, is this a survey I want to deploy? I know, Matt, you can't send too much stuff to people right now. You're going to overwhelm them, and then they're going to end up ignoring the really important stuff. And then one of the challenges we've had in HR is that now we've got all the safety stuff that we have to incorporate. So it is a pie. That pie doesn't get any bigger. You just have to be more meticulous about what that pie looks like. So what do I want to measure? There's certain things that us as humans seem to need in the context of work. And one of those things that keeps coming back is the concept of attention. We need attention. And sometimes it could be very relaxed attention, like how are you doing? How are the kids? How was your weekend? But for the most part, the attention that humans tend to thrive on is Do you know what I'm working on right now? Do you know what my challenges are? Do you know what my world looks like? And do you have any interest in helping me? There's times when there might be no solution to the problem. I'm not going to take the workload off because we're all in the same boat. We've got 20 open positions in this department alone. And until we fill them, we're going to be working a little bit harder. But just the fact that I'm listening to you and I'm trying to work with you is going to make a material difference. So as I kind of transition to asking you guys again to give me a little bit of context, tell me, we'll go back to April since you've had the most time to think about the data that you focus on. When you sit on a regular basis and you do pull up reports, what is the data that is most meaningful to you for you to be able to understand where are my people at and what can I be doing? What can I be prioritizing to make their lives a little bit better and their experience at work a little bit more pleasant or at least productive?
Sure. And I would say I wish we did have 32 people doing analytics. So I do love that. But we really had to get more strategic about when and what kind of pulse surveys to do through this. And I would say keeping up on that and actually doing some open forums with leaders. If we tried something or rolled something out to say, how is this the same or different? Like when we set up our principles for Flex at Ameritas and tried to figure out how do those work. One of the foundations was to move to remote work is not a perk. It's one of our pieces of our talent strategy to get things done. And here's how we're going to make sure we're inclusive with all types of workers. And so I think being strategic about that, of course, I pull up all the regular reports that we get around turnover. I would say I pay a lot of attention to the surveys we do after each program that we have. So we have a lot of leadership programs and then our onboarding and engagement. And we also use some information from our wellness partner, which is called Virgin Pulse. So we can use that to be pretty agile, and that's what we did. We are remarkably, very lucky. We have 82% participation on that, which is crazy. And we started that platform in 2019 because we actually had under 10% of our population actually engaged actively in wellness and well-being. And so we really tried to do all 5 types of well-being, but we can push cards out and get answers about what people want and need next. But also just to your point of being too much information you can't even keep track of. If we need a reminder or something is coming up, that's another good way to press it out. So we're getting feedback from most of the population, but we're also pushing some things out. And then I would say too, just we slice our information to your point of getting more local, not just by the leader and that team, but also by the job family, the job level, the location, and then time here. So do we see that people that just started here aren't as engaged, or do we see that people have been here a long time, maybe they are getting disengaged? So we try to look at those factors, and what we've gone to is adjusting our plan more frequently. So, we do this annual plan, and I mentioned we're in the insurance industry. It's very steady. A lot of, when you think about life insurance and disability and retirement plans, those are all very long tails. And so we really tried to move to this higher level of agility to try it and respond and say, we did try this, it didn't work, and fail fast and move on, instead of saying, boy, we better have everything actuarially algorithmed out from now until 2030, and then we'll do it. So I think speed to pushing out, speed to market for HR really happened. We always only used to talk about that with our products. And that has made a huge difference. And then I think too, approachability of leaders. Most of our leaders of small teams and large teams, so whether you're a part of senior management or not, have been doing weekly videos that they send out to the teams to say, this is how I'm trying to make sure I incorporate filling up my cup while I get my work done in this way. And we're working on this huge project. Here's what we got done this week. And kind of advertising that celebration to Andrea's point of the 3 C's. So those are the big things that we look at, but I really do wish that I had like exit interview data a little bit quicker and other information at my fingertips that I don't have yet.
Absolutely. No, and I think what you mentioned in terms specifically from a performance standpoint, I think it's a good encapsulation of the dynamics of what we expect as a society today. And obviously the younger workforce that is joining, or waiting a year for the organization to tell me where I stand, it's just it's outrageous. And I know that even now, all of you are nodding, and it's like, of course not. But I remember 3, 4, 5 years ago, this was a big debate in our industry, in our discipline. Should we be doing it once a year, or should we be doing it more often? This study that I just mentioned, one of the key metrics that came back was not only is onboarding critical, but the frequency within which it's not just about a performance rating, it's about a performance conversation. If you think about it from an employee's perspective, the reason why having a performance conversation is so important, or quote unquote getting a rating, is because there's two things. I need to make sure I know where I stand, and then I want to make sure that there's equity in my world. I'm being fairly compensated for my efforts. And if you're able to do that, then the employee can just focus on working, doing the job. If I know my company's looking out for me, and I know what I need to do to get better, and to be adding the consistent value that the organization needs from me, then we will be okay. When we looked at these organizations, these HR departments that were getting the highest levels of recognition from their employees, by and large, most of them had more frequent performance programs in place. It didn't mean that there needed to be a measurement tied to it. There was a measurement, by the way. I know that's still up for debate. Do we have a measurement? And if so, what does the measurement look like? And if we have time, I can throw a couple of things out around what we recommend. But the key thing is that conversation. Is somebody talking to the employee about their performance, giving them the good, the bad, and the ugly, but more importantly, helping them locate what ideal looks like, and what does it look like for you, not for the department, not for the job function, but as I'm talking to you, April, what is excellence for you in the context of this role, in the context of our relationship, where we've been and where we're going. Matt, I'm really fascinated to hear a little bit from you. You gave me some really good insights around some of the things that you do pay close attention to from an IT perspective. Now, as you're paying close attention to, what can you report on? What is it that you monitor and track?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'd like to kind of answer it in two parts. One, just IT as a support organization, looking outward to the organization, and what different ways we can kind of track employee engagement, those kinds of things, specifically around the onboarding process. So we spend a lot of time, in like I said, in employees' first, 20 or 10 to 30 days. And so we're looking for employees who are opening support tickets within the first week, within the first month, saying something isn't working, or I have a question, those kinds of things. Our support organization, our service desk, or help desk, however you want to, it's different names in different organizations. They are attuned to new employees. New employees get a little badge in our service desk software, so that they know that they're a new employee, and they're attuned to them to know, are these people asking technology questions, or are they just asking questions about how a particular piece of software works? And with that, they will triage that over to someone who can help them kind of with that connectedness that you're talking about, making sure that they're able to not just operate the technology, but use the technology to get their job done. So if they're having a problem with printing or something, that's a technology issue. But if they're having a question of how does this particular piece of software help me do my job, that's something better answered. Someone who uses that software on a daily basis. And so we have champions for all of the different software that we run that we can relate, send them to. And so it's, again, from a support perspective, we really want to make sure that an employee's problem is solved the first time, and it's solved as quickly as possible. And so if that's handled by someone outside of IT, we're very quick to get them to someone who can actually solve their problem and not be a hindrance. So from a support perspective, we really look at the friction, and we measure that by the number of tickets or support questions that they're asking. Internally, the IT operation, we all had to start working remotely as well. And how do we continue to provide support and strategy to the organization? One of the strategies that we employed very quickly is we made the number of not direct reports, but the number of people that people were responsible for, we made that number much smaller. So we created group leaders within the organization, and we said that a group cannot exceed more than 4 people, because managing people in person is difficult enough. Managing them remotely is even more difficult. And so we identified people within the organization who maybe weren't ready for management, but had natural leadership skills, and we made them leaders within the support organization. And then we really increased the number of check-ins that we did, because we're not seeing each other every day. It just isn't happening. And so the number of check-ins, if we had an IT person who's responsible for 10 engineers, doing a check-in would take a lot of time. And so lowering the number of people that they're actually responsible for, really helped. And then what we track internally is that conversation has a pretty stable cadence. They're asking questions like, what are you working on today? And how are you, what can I do to help you do those things? Or some variation of that. We train them to do that. And then they're using kind of an inbuilt software that we have to kind of record that. And so that the group leader is then reviewing the check-in from the day before, so they can remember, yesterday you said you were working on this, how's that going? Those kinds of things. And so the check-in process has really helped with the stickiness of helping the individual groups, stay more engaged.
No, that's absolutely brilliant. One of the things that we've studied for a while, there's a couple of things. The first thing is there's different ways of measuring. So we might think that we're measuring really well, but the end result might not necessarily correlate to the outcomes that we want. And I'll give you an example. When you look at looking at the prior study, the one about resilience and the one about engagement, there's one question that seemed to really point people in the direction of whether they were going to be likely to leave or look for another job. And that question was, do I trust my team leader or not? Is there trust? Is there a feeling of trust? When you look at McKinsey just came out with a study not too long ago, and they basically validated the same thing. Employees that 74% of employees that said they had a good relationship with that leader were more likely to stay or want to leave. So the first thing that comes to me is, number one, and again, it's crashing glimpse of the obvious, the leader matters. They're very important. So one piece of advice I would always give anybody in an IT or even in an HR position is partner with leaders. Figure out ways to be able to enable them. They're always going to be closer to your people and to the work than you could ever be. But what if you just go and you ask that question? If I ask you, Andrea, do you trust your team leader? That might not be the best question to ask in the context of a work environment that, let's say, you're going to ask it 4 times a year. Why? There's something called the idiosyncratic rater effect. And how do I define trust? Maybe Andrea told me that my workload was going to decrease, but she wasn't able to fill that role in time, so it didn't. That might change the way that I respond to that survey, and it might give me a false reading regarding how I feel about my leader. And one of the other things we found is that as you're constructing surveys and as you're sending out questions to people, don't ask them directly. Ask them about what their experience feels like. And I'll give you 2 quick examples of questions that we found that were incredibly effective at measuring what that dynamic between a team leader and a team member without going so direct as to whether they like them or they trust them. One of those questions would be, do I feel like I'm recognized for excellent work? You're getting at the core of the same issue, but you're not asking it directly. And when Andrea answers that question, it's a lot harder for other things to change or impact her answer in a way that'll give us a false reading. And if I ask that question 4 times over the course of the year, there's a very good chance that the answer is going to be very pertinent to what's happening right now and then. Do I feel like I'm challenged to grow in my role? That is another really good question. As I kind of I tee you back up, Andrea, and we get close to the closing of the event. Tell me a little bit more about leaders in your organization, and what is your perspective, and what have you done in the near term with all the disconnection and the lack of connectivity to make sure that your leaders are equipped to be that solid partner to you and to impact the employee experience?
Thanks, Christian. So much of what you just said really resonated, especially that, do I feel like I'm challenged to grow? That's been a big question for us. And for our leaders, sometimes it's just back to the basics. So we have equipped our leaders with that set of questions that they should ask. Because in many instances, a lot of times we'll say, make sure you're connecting with your team, make sure your team members feel heard, make sure you're finding out what motivates them, make sure, you know how they want to grow. But if we haven't really equipped them with just some of the right ways to ask those questions, they may not necessarily be getting to those right answers, right? So we've put together question sets where we have our leaders like use these questions. It will help you be consistent to make sure every employee, right? It will help you, as you go through those, really gain some insight about, what's going on with your people in a way that is probably different than some of the one-on-ones you've had in the past. So try it and let us know what that looks like. And we've had some really great feedback on that in terms of people connecting with their teams in ways that they hadn't really thought about before. Just the aha of, oh, wow, like I never even thought to ask that question, and it could give you a gold mine of how you can really help that person do their best work and be their best self at work.
Hey, Christian, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we're like 3 minutes away from the end.
I was about to close it out. Yes.
And one thing I want Andrea to answer, because it was a question that was asked a while back, was if you could share the platform that you're using for your intranet, Andrea. I think there's people out there that are curious what it is.
Yeah, it's quite simple, actually. It's SharePoint, and we're leveraging Valo to maximize the SharePoint.
Thank you. So
Perfect.
Christian,
Yes.
we got to wrap.
Absolutely. So I'll close out right now. It does feel like it's never enough time.
I know.
Just summarizing some of the thoughts and ideas that I brought in that we heard from the panel today. My recommendation is always is number one, stay close to your people, find ways that are efficient to measure the employee experience at the local level, create that bridge, that partnership with your leaders, focus as much energy as you can on connection, both between team members and team leaders, and then bringing that thread all the way back up to the organizational level. And one of the things that we'll look at, hopefully, as you continue your conversations, is don't forget that we're dealing with humans at work and that humanity is at the core of everything that we do. You got to make them feel inspired. I think a lot of reasons why a lot of people are feeling the way they do about their work is because it's hard for you to be able to bring the person to work. And I think the more we learn about our people, the nature of the work that they do, and how to be able to help them do both, do the work while bringing their personalities, their loves, and their passions, I think are really going to help us as we move forward. But again, Cindy, thank you so much for the time. Thank you guys so much for the conversation. I really enjoyed it. I wish I could have asked you guys about 7 more questions, but we'll leave those for a future date. Thank you.
And let me also say thank you to April and Andrea and Matt. You guys were amazing, and I know everybody enjoyed it. And Christian, I think we've got one thing that others would like. If you could send the links to the studies that you talked about, I think that would be helpful. Sue Drath of Energizer asked about that, but I would bet you there's others on the call that would love that. So thank you guys. It was amazing. We really appreciate everybody being here. And thanks again to April, Andrea, and Matt. Appreciate it. And Christian, you are great. Thanks.